project is on the development of dual material glove protectors for skiers and snowboarders. So here in the Midwest, tow ropes were invented to get people up the hills very quickly because there are obviously a lot of small hills, small ski resorts here. However, these tow ropes are often very abrasive on the gloves of riders and can often lead to tearing and rippage and just destroying the gloves altogether. So to counteract this, these gray glove protectors were invented, which are essentially just a piece of cowhide strapped over a person's gloves, which are designed to protect against the abrasive forces of a tow rope. However, these glove protectors have two big flaws. One is that they're not very abrasion resistant and can often wear out very quickly. I've had this pair for about a month and they're already wearing thin. And the second is that they're not hydrophobic or freeze resistant in any way, meaning that as they're exposed to the snow and the elements when you're out skiing or snowboarding, they'll absorb water and then that water will subsequently freeze, essentially rendering a rider's hands very immobile, which can lead to discomfort and annoyance. So my hypothesis was that if I could construct a glove protector made out of a bottom layer of a freeze-resistant material, followed by a geometric top layer of a sort of patterned abrasion-resistant material, or a more abrasion-resistant material, it could solve the issues present in these gray glove protectors. The materials that I would be testing for this are, on the first hand, the abrasion-resistant ones. We have a lambskin, a fiberglass fabric, a Kevlar, and then the original protector as a control. And then for the freeze resistance, I have an Otter-X canvas, which is like a more water-resistant canvas, an oilcloth, neoprene, a polyurethane laminated fabric, and then the original protector as a control. So when I first started my project, I wanted to first test off the abrasion resistant side. And I found that actually constructing a sort of compact miniaturized tow rope was the best way to do this, as normal abrasion resistant testers, these rhythmic abrasion testing machines, apply forces in a more circular pattern, which is not ideal and not accurate to the forces that would be applied to a real world tow rope. So I figured that constructing a miniaturized tow rope would reflect real world conditions the most accurately. So what I did was I went with a more vertical option. I would essentially mount a bunch of pulleys to a standing piece of plywood, have a rope run through that, and then that rope would run through a U-channel, and as it ran through that U-channel, it would poke out of the top a little bit, and since it's poking out of the top, we could essentially apply a platform with material on the other side. So this is our material. Could apply that, stick it onto a platform, apply it onto the tow rope, and then test the abrasion against the tow rope of the materials that way by testing the weight before and after it was applied to the tow rope. And I could do this at multiple different times, at multiple different temperatures, at different pressures by stacking weights on top of the platform, and for different geometric patterns of material. So there was a lot of freedom and a lot of variables I could test. However, this platform took a very long time to construct. It went through many redesigns, from the pulleys to the motor selection to just the overall design as a whole. It was very complicated. So after about 4 months of trying to develop that, I switched focus of my project to testing the freeze-resistant side of materials. And the way this would work is I would essentially suspend a strip of material just like this in between two platforms, and then those platforms would have slits in it where the material would sit. And then I would apply mass to the center of this material, and it would slip down, which allowed me to test the rigidity of these materials. Right? And testing rigidity is important because that is the main force that is being held up when these glove protectors freeze. They get too rigid, they're not loose or bendy enough. So I have tested and the way I would apply mass to this strip is using this 3D printed dish, which is 63 grams on its own, and then it could hold around weights that are around 35 grams each. And the way I would do this is I would suspend the material midair, right? Put the dish on the center, measure the downward displacement, and then repeat that 6 times for each a sort of level of weight. So 0 weights, 1 weight, 2 weight, 3 weight, hit it 6 times, find the average downward displacement, and then plot it on a chart of displacement over added mass. And I would then do this for the sort of strip of material at room temperature, and then also when it's been frozen at -20 degrees for 1 hour after being exposed to water. And what I found is that for both materials that I've tested, the IRX canvas and the oilcloth, their rigidity increased significantly after being frozen. For the IRX canvas, it had around 50% rigidity increase, and for the oilcloth, it had a 65% rigidity increase. So, and what this means is that they would not be good substitutes for this material, as even though they claim to be hydrophobic, after they're exposed to water, they do absorb some, and then that water will freeze, rendering the gloves or the materials much more rigid. And we can see that again displayed in the mass increase. After exposing gloves to water, I found a 30.2% mass increase in the oilcloth and an 11.3% mass increase in the canvas. However, this leads me to my next steps of finishing all my freeze-resistant materials. So this would include the polyurethane laminated fabric, the neoprene, and the original protector as a control. And then I want to retest all the materials at -20 degrees for 2 hours versus 1 hour of freeze times, which is what I did for these graphs, to see if an increased exposure time changes the results in any sort of way. And then after that, I would like to finish the construction of my tow rope and collect data on the abrasion-resistant materials, which will likely lead this project into a second year of development. And then for the applications of my project, obviously it's the creation of a prototype or a more functional glove protector that can be used and does not have the same flaws in this one. And it's also creating a glove protector that is more sustainable, as most of the fabrics that I'm using in testing can either be gotten from recycled sources or are eco-friendly in nature, such as the canvas. Thank you very much.